Hey, I'm Hal Herring. I got a podcast called Carrying the Fire. I'm finishing a book right now on the American public lands. And welcome to the Prairie Farm Podcast.
I'm Mark Kenyon.
I'm Dr. Julie Meechan.
I'm Steve Hansen.
I'm Jill Bebout.
Chad Gravy.
My name is Jeremy French.
I'm Laura Walter.
Carol Hawksbergen, owner of Hoxie Native Seeds, and this is the Prairie Farm Podcast.
This is Hal Herring, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Podcast.
Skip Sly, Iowa Whitetail.
Valerie Van Coten, State Historical Society of Iowa.
Dr. Matt Helmer at Iowa State University.
My name is Kyle Laubarger with the Native Habitat Project.
I'm Judd McCullum. I appeared out of the wilderness, and this is the Prairie Farm Podcast.
Welcome to the Prairie Farm Podcast.
A lot of companies talk about conservation, but I want to tell you about a company that actually puts their money where their mouth is. Birdhuntersupply.com is a great company. I know the owner, Joe. He's a great dude. We've had the privilege of working with him, and let's just say he really puts his money where his mouth is. A large percentage of his profits from Bird Hunter Supply go to a conservation organization of your choice at checkout. So your purchase actually puts money towards conservation, and it's not just a roundup. It's not just asking you to donate on top of your purchase. This is included with your purchase. This man is running his very own small business version of Pittman Robertson, except without all the government stuff. I'm a big fan of that. So whether you're buying hunting apparel, decoys, dog training gear, you are actually going to be giving back to conservation. That is my friend Joe at birdhuntersupply.com. We love that company. We love what they have going on. Oh, and they do a really great job with their website. Makes it very easy. birdhuntersupply.com.
Hal, we've been covering as much as people who can listen to a few podcasts and read a few articles from 1,000+ miles away, the issue with the American Prairie grazing permits. And I read a book that you recommended to me by Betsy Gaines. I think it's called American Zion, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Fantastic book. Anyone who's listening in needs to listen to that or read it. I listened to it while I was working last summer. Learned so much. And in there, she gets into grazing permits a little bit. If I understand it correctly, because a lot of the talk around this is the poor cattlemen, they would just like to graze their cattle, but they get their permits taken away by this big, billion-dollar supported conservation machine, which is American Prairie. And they're just, once those permits are taken away, they can't get them back. And I think that is a false representation as to what's going on. And one of the main things that I see as being poorly represented there is those permits, they aren't like on the auction block, right? That once your family has a grazing permit, it is yours to lose, right? You just kind of renew it every year. Is that how that works out in the West with BLM?
If you own the property that's contiguous to it,
okay,
you have first right, and they usually don't let them go.
Right.
So, because if I own 250 deeded acres. And I'm running cattle in a place that runs, say, 8 to 12 cows per section, I'm going to need that permit to stay in business, right?
Sure.
And the reason that BLM land is there is because it wasn't claimed under the 1862 Homestead Act or how many Homestead Act do we have, right? Desert and Land Act, the Desert Land Act, the Timber and Stone Act, the 1862 Act, the 1909, which John Wesley Powell said, please don't do, where they gave away all the arid West. And then people, of course, abandoned a lot of that when it found out that you couldn't make a living on it. And that became the Bureau of Land Management Lands.
Sure.
And so that land is there under the management of the BLM because it couldn't put enough pounds on cows to pay a land tax if you owned it deeded.
Sure.
And if you ever traveled Nevada, 73% of Nevada is federally owned. And most of that is BLM, managed by the Bureau of Land Management. It's because nobody claimed those deserts, right?
Yeah.
But if you go through eastern Montana or you go through Nevada with an Onyx, which is something in northern Nevada I've been doing a lot in the last few years. We had some jobs down there. Mm-hmm. Your Onyx will show that every piece of water, if you see a green thing out there, and you look at your Onyx, it will have been claimed under one of the Homestead Acts or the Desert Land Act, and it will be private.
Wow. So anywhere that is livable enough to make or good enough to make a go at it with livestock remains in private control.
It was claimed under the Desert Land Act usually, where you have to irrigate it a little bit, but it was kind of, if you ever read Cadillac Desert by Mark Reisner.
I've started it, but I have not finished it.
It's a big one.
Yes, it is. It is a long book.
Yeah, but that's why we have all this, and under the Taylor Grazing Act in 1934, so everybody had to kind of support the Taylor Grazing Act because free range was causing Johnson County War down in 1892. The Johnson County War in between Buffalo, Wyoming. One of my favorite stories in American history, really. Nate Champion makes the stand against the Stock Growers Association and dies, in a glorious standoff. Right?
I'm not familiar with this story. Just give us the cliff notes here real quick.
Well, so the cattlemen, after the U.S. government had used the taxpayer money to fight the Sioux, after the Fetterman massacre, after the wagon box fight, all of that. So we had militarily, we being the U.S., had militarily beaten or conquested the Sioux. Right? They were no longer a military force. So they drove all the cows up from Texas to take advantage, and the buffalo were exterminated about 1876, right in there. So there's all this grass, right?
Yeah.
And so they begin settling that part of Wyoming, which is it's really very beautiful, around Buffalo, Sheridan. Yep. And it was free, man. There was no claim to any of it, right? It was just land. And it's a tough place to make it, but if you could make it. So they did stuff. You go to a site called Wyoming Tales and Trails.
Okay,
it's an incredible internet resource on this. And they were doing stuff like claiming all the sections in huge squares and then letting the federal government, keep the inside, but nobody else could get to it. So this has been rife with opportunistic, I wouldn't call it outright fraud, opportunistic capitalist endeavor from the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
And so, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But these guys had their way, Wyoming Stock Growers Association had their way with that part of Wyoming for many, many years. And they built these small empires. These people wintered through the winter of 1886 and 87, which almost destroyed the cattle industry in the West. Okay, so they made it. These guys are tough. Now, I'm not saying these ain't some namby-pamby folks. They're tough.
Right.
But they begin bringing in itinerant cowboys from all over. And some of those guys wanted to build their own herds, right? So they begin using the Homestead Act to claim, say, Chugwater, the Chugwater Creek. Mm-hmm. Well, if you control the water, you don't have to own the land over yonder. You can let the government have that and not pay taxes, and you have free range, but nobody else can use your range because you have the water source.
Yeah.
So that was really hard on these guys who had been there for, say, 10, 12 years.
Sure.
It's funny, there's a cool thing. Some of these guys were super tough people who had been, they called them remittance men. And they were kicked out of royal families in England because they were they're so wild, right? They couldn't live in the old country. So they paid for them to come over to the United States.
Man,
and get out.
As a former teacher, that sounds like a terrible thing for the people living out west.
Yes.
Let's get all the worst students in class. Let's go put them in that class.
Yeah. And I'm a gun guy. I wrote a book on historic firearms and stuff, and a lot of these guys carried a Webley Bulldog. It's a little break open revolver, revolver, and they're made in London at the time. And I was like, how come all these guys got Webleys? It's a 44, it's a weird little cartridge they don't use anymore. And the reason they had Webleys because they're Englishmen, right?
Yeah, they brought it with them.
Yeah. And so anyway, the Cowboys were branding a lot of what they call slicks, right, which is an unbranded calf.
Okay.
So they were building their own herds. And the Wyoming Stock Growers Association got together, and they said, we got to clear these people out. They're all rustlers. And most of them were just homesteaders. So they got a convoy of what they call the regulators out of Texas. They were gunmen. And they came in on a train to Colorado somewhere, and they picked them all up. And they claimed to have warrants for all these rustlers. And they then made this huge caravan and went through the country, killing people. And at one point, so the homesteaders decided to fight back. And Nate Champion was a famous cowboy there who had made some claims of his own homestead claims. They claimed he was a rustler. Everybody else claimed he wasn't. He was very popular. And they caught up to Nate Champion and one of his partners in a little bunkhouse. I'm trying to remember the name of the creek. Crazy Woman Creek, I think. It was the TA ranch. And they laid siege to him. They shot the other guy when he went out to take a leak in the morning and get coffee water. And then Nate Champion made this incredible stand. It's like something out of a book.
Yeah.
And he was able to write a few things before they burned him out. And he said, the cabin's totally on fire now. I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
And he's out there in his socks, right? Because they just got woken up. And this is in April, I think. So it wasn't, the weather was bad, so people weren't working that much, right?
Sure.
They're sitting that waiting time, right?
Right, yeah.
And anyway, he went out and he got killed. And they left him there and moved on the whole caravan to the next place. Well, when somebody came by the ranch to see what was going on, and they found him, they were like, we'll see about this. They went to Buffalo, Wyoming, which was the home of the rustlers, which really was just a homesteader outpost, right? And they collected weapons, and the local hardware store armed every able-bodied man. And they went out and confronted the Wyoming stock growers and the regulators. And they holed them up at a big ranch where they had taken shelter. And the Texas guys said, hey, man, we're losing this fight. I think we're all going to be killed. Like, we're going to get hung. How about opening that trunk and show us those warrants you have for all these people we've been chasing? And there weren't any warrants. And so they kind of lost their support, right, from their own little militia, paramilitary. And they had cut the telegraph lines. So the cavalry, which was based around Cheyenne, who also did not like this Stock Growers Association because they had killed a woman named Cattle Kate. I can't remember her last name. They had hung them, and they were like running this little Saudi bar, like where a lot of the cavalrymen like to drink.
Yeah.
And they had falsely accused her of all kind of stuff, and they had actually hung her and her partner.
Man.
And so the cavalrymen were not really they didn't like the regulators and the Wyoming stock growers guys.
Sure.
But somebody patched the telegraph lines together, and the cavalry did come and save them because they were the leading businessmen of the county,
Sure. Yeah.
And it's a really good American story. One of the things that it led to was people started going loud. The free reign stuff, like that movie with Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
Where they battle it out.
I remember.
It's a great movie.
That's a good movie, yeah.
And they said somebody's got to do something. There was a guy down in the Arizona Strip named Preston Nutter, who was he was one of the few people down there who wasn't a Latter-day Saints.
Okay,
But he ran enormous numbers of cows out of the deserts there.
Sure.
And he was like the ultimate libertarian free range guy, you know. But he went to Washington and testified on behalf of getting the Taylor Grazing Act, because people were just pouring cows out everywhere until there was no grass left whatsoever.
Yeah. Almost like a population crash event is what it's setting up
it
for.
Would be,
like in nature, yeah.
Totally. And this is before they had the invasives were just coming in, right? Like cheat and appweed and stuff that would reduce the carrying capacity of those ranges really quick. So the old high protein bunch grass was still out there in the sage. It was still out there in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could run more cows before the introduction of cheat.
Sure.
So the long and short, that's the leases that the American Prairie have taken over are contiguous to these ranches that they have purchased. And they were attached.
Yeah.
And so...
and the permits would have been open, right? It wasn't like they took those permits from somebody else.
When they bought the ranch, I did a story about American Prairie really long time ago when they got started, and I'm going to use that as the one I know. The Wiederick Ranch that they bought, had an attached grazing lease, and I don't know how big it is, but when they bought that ranch, they assumed control of that lease unless they gave it up.
Okay.
You know,
I suppose could you skip over someone in line for that grazing permit if, let's say, if somebody who does not have contiguous land with a section of BLM land, but maybe they have land 2 miles away, and so they're moving cows through livestock trailers, putting them out there, but now you get a new landowner who is contiguous, who does also want to graze. Can they pull your permit out from under you, even though you've had it, let's say, for 20 years, you just didn't have contiguous land with it, but because there's that preference point, we'll say, given to the other person who now wants to graze it as well, but they have the contiguous land, could that theoretically happen?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how they work that out.
Okay. I'm curious. So there's a lot of talk about extracting from the land, right? And now a conservative amount of extracting from the land can be very helpful to the land. There are many ways to extract from the land. For instance, in Iowa farm ground, you can graze it. That's technically extracting from the land. But you can corn and bean it. Dramatically different ecological impacts and economic impacts. You've been thinking about this for thousands of hours. What, in terms of these grazing leases, one, is there any way to extract from some of these lands? Because they're quite a bit more sparse. There's a lot less rain out there. Is there any way to extract at all besides maybe tourism where it can make sense? And two, are these leases a good way to do it? Or I'm assuming I know the answer to this. Would it be better to like drill for oil or, mine for minerals? What is there a good way to extract from these lands, and is leasing the way to do it?
Okay, so until recently, well, I've been a big supporter of Taylor Grazing Act and grazing in the West. It's funny because it's extractive, but it's good. I believe that the ecological problems can be that can be worked out by the Bureau of Land Management and range conservationists and whatnot. I'm a supporter of grazing on public lands, but as long as it's regulated by an impartial, the federal government, like the range conservationist, he can't be like best buddies with the rancher and go like, well, we'll just leave all the cows out there during the drought. Mm-hmm. But I believe that, and I'm kind of kicked out of the groovier part of the environmentalist movement with this, right? Because I also believe that even in very arid places, you could support a few cows so that you'd have a local supply of beef. Mm. Now, I can't send my daughter to college on the money I make off of the cows in southern Idaho, say. Could you hold on just a second?
Yep, no problem. I'm going to go lock the door, Nick, because I don't want a customer to walk in.
That was the fax machine for the Augusta Sewer and Water.
That is the wildest thing I've ever heard you say, is that you use a fax machine.
I don't. The Augusta Sewer and Water does, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Was that your internet, Hal?
No, it was the Augusta Sewer and Water fax machine.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, I think that I don't think that we've done. I think that the grazing has a place for sure, and in eastern Montana, that country was bison country. So a lot of it is evolved with grazing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you can't hit it as hard as you can hit Iowa.
Right, yeah.
You know, you're not going to put as many cows out there as you are in the tall grass of Kansas.
Yeah.
But people know that, and the ranchers know that too. There are good stewards for sure. I think it's, dude, I can't believe that they've made this move on the American Prairie to take these permits, because another administration, another bunch of people could gang up and take and do. They've woken a sleeping dog, man.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, to me the whole thing seems petty and is run and is motivated by the things that. So there's a new phrase that I'm trying to use more often. It's technically right, practically wrong.
Yeah.
So and I feel that this administration is fueled by that, and the folks worshiping this administration are fueled by being technically right and practically wrong. And just a quick example would be, it's my son's birthday today, and he is my oldest child. And let's say one of his birthday presents that he just opened up this morning, and one of his younger sisters actually just got him his first set of Vortex binos. He asked for some binoculars for his birthday. So they make a great kid-sized binocular, the Bantams. He just turned 9, and it's a good size for him.
Not sponsored, but happy to be.
Right, yeah. Love that company. Good American company up in the great state of Wisconsin. But let's say he's got his new binoculars, and one of his younger sisters is playing with them, and he wasn't playing with them at the time or using them, and they're looking through them, and he walks up and yanks them out of her hands and says, "Hey, this is mine."
Right.
He's technically right. They are his. He just got them this morning, and it's even his birthday today. But he is practically wrong by his practice is wrong by how he got him back, right?
Is today Jonas's birthday?
Yeah, it is.
I thought it was in June.
No,
Brother, that's today. Not good.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Well, it's almost June. But which reminds us, Judd's 40th is coming up real quick, buddy.
Yeah,
less than a week.
The big 4-0.
But
man, he's half your age.
Oh, thanks. But I view this whole grazing permit deal with American Prairie as being, maybe they're technically right. They're saying that these are not, and even still, I think they still qualify based on how American Prairie treats these bison. But they're saying they're not livestock. Well, they're saying they're releasing wild animals.
Well, that's not. They've already declared them as livestock back in the day here in Montana, uniquely.
And they treat them like livestock.
Yes, and
it's just an alternative.
When your son rips those binoculars from his sister, not only has he done something petty and rude that was unnecessary, but he just lost an ally.
Yes.
And that's what I think is happening right here.
Yeah.
I find this is like somebody who is playing a game who, in Sun Tzu, in the Art of War, He says the opponent also has a vote, always.
Yeah.
Remember. And so why would you create opponents? I've heard more people talking about the Taylor Grazing Act and the $1.35 to $1.66 AUM price on public land leasing than I have an animal unit month. It's the amount of forage eaten by a cow-calf pair in a month. This is the lowest grazing rate in the world.
$1.66. Wow.
Yep. And so whether that's right or wrong, I don't think it's wrong. Because I don't think it's wrong for the government for our taxpayers to subsidize in some way the production of food for the United States, as long as it's not an ecological disaster, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but these entitlements can go wrong. But I have heard more people talking about the low AUM price, dude, than in my entire life. If you were the beneficiary of that and you were using that as the base for the value of your home property, your deeded land, do I want somebody in New Jersey and Tallahassee questioning what's going on in Phillips County, Montana on the public land? I can't believe they've done this. I sat there and was like, whoa, man, who and I want to know who. There's some really fine ranching families out there.
Oh yeah,
and I doubt. Dig this. I doubt seriously that they are supporters of this action.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's another thing. The AP, they are leasing to local ranchers their grass on their deeded.
On the stuff they own. They're allowing cattle to
thousands of AUMs.
Wow.
And that little story didn't get told when the governor decided he supported this. I don't understand this. I got to tell you.
Who's going to? I mean, who? So with these permits taken away, I don't assume that there will be no grazing now on those acres, and they're going to be left, fallow and untouched.
Absolutely not.
Who stands to get those permits then?
I don't know, and it'll be interesting to know who steps up to try to take them over, or will AP try to run beef on them? Will AP? I don't know if you can sublease either.
What was this? So what was this motivated by? Was this just a small story that got out of hand, and so the governor needed to do some PR, or what actually happened?
Well, what had happened was that people the American Prairie is funded by donors from all over. There's small donors too, but there's also very wealthy donors.
Oh, I've seen the vice president list. It's big.
Yeah. So they have been buying ranches in eastern Montana and then prioritizing conservation on them. Prairie work and native plants and
it's been one of the greatest prairie conservation success stories that I've ever heard of.
Right. And because it didn't require prairie for sure.
Yeah.
It didn't require the government stepping in and making a national park. And short of national parks, it's probably
yet it's open to the public.
Yeah.
It is. And the opponents of the AP are always going, well, they can close it at any time. And I was like, well, before this, so let me give you a personal anecdote. I was when my kids were little, we were catfishing down on the mouth of the Judith River on the Missouri River. And there came this huge storm, just like slate wiper kind of thunderstorm. And we took shelter in this old building. And this guy comes driving down there in a pickup through the storm. I don't know how he saw us in there. And he says, man, I'm the manager here and y'all got to get out. And I said, get out like these two little kids out in this storm? And he said, yes, it hurts me. I wouldn't do this, but nobody is allowed on this private here. That's the PN Ranch. And I got the 4-year-old and the 7-year-old or whatever, and we treated it as an adventure.
Yeah, technically right and practically wrong.
Yeah, but the manager had no call in it. He said, I feel bad about this. And so we took off hiking back across the Missouri and got on the bridge and went back to our camp. And that PN ranch is now open to the public. All of that along the Missouri, because the American Prairie bought the deeded part of that, the deeded land.
Yeah, what a loss for the public, right?
Yeah, right. And you can walk to the mouth of the Judith, which is a very historical, place where the steamship stopped for wood, and the Blackfeet had run that.
Well, it was named. Was it named by Lewis or named by Clark after like his sister-in-law or something?
Right, one of them, right, for sure.
Yeah.
The Judith. And you go up the Judith, and it's a very historical place. Not only for like in European history, but since the Ice Age, like people have been walking that Missouri River corridor, and
sure, yeah.
I mean, it's a blood-soaked ground of lots of history, and so you can go there now and walk around, and I just I don't know, man. I'm baffled by this situation we're in.
Yeah, the reasonings I've been reading is, and what I've heard from other people that are much closer to what goes on out west than what we are, is this idea of loss of ranching culture, loss of CRP faces a similar criticism, right, from Big Ag. Now that's good farmland that somebody could be using and
as long as I got my federal crop insurance.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And I mean, we just have such a demand for corn and soybeans. It's really just we need every last acre. We can't invent enough uses. But
the enemy of ranching culture is the big four beef processors who set the price.
Yep.
Where when I'm working super arid land, and I mean, I just, again, this culture there in that Macomb, Phillips Valley County, Montana, it's really cool. Like these are people who make it in the toughest place. Like it's like the margin, right? I mean, by the time you get over to North Dakota, it starts raining a little again, right?
Yeah.
And when you get down to Yellowstone, you're at really low elevation. So, like, things can go there. You can have a big garden there along the Yellowstone, right? But when you're making it in, Malta, Montana, south, you are really got to be on your game. And so that culture is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the American Prairie is not killing that culture. Those ranches are for sale because they weren't making their margins are tight.
Right. Yeah. So to me, it seems like the whole controversy is fueled by negative human emotion, and it's what I mean. And I'm not saying that I'm above this myself. When I'm upset, I want a lightning rod. I want someone to blame,
right?
Especially if it's not clear whose fault it is. And to me, it seems like it's a decision that was made to be a favor to friends who were complaining about something, and they chose American Prairie to be their target. And the reason I'm belaboring this point is because I think whether it's a country, whether it's a state, whether it's a county, or even your own household, when you pass hand judgments down and regulate based on someone's bad feelings, your very foundation for what your decision making is ugliness. And what can you expect to be the final outcome? Like you're saying, do people really think that, wow, we pulled a big win over here on American Prairie? Well, I mean, and I don't. We interviewed Sean Garrity, the guy who basically got American Prairie started. Not that he did it alone, but
I know Sean. He's been a visitor here at my home. Yeah,
he seemed like such an incredible guy, and I've heard him interviewed other times, and you can see it through the culture when I hear other people from American Prairie, especially Allison Fox, the new CEO. It is a turn the other cheek type of culture that they have around there. And so I don't expect the the retribution that I think you're right in saying is coming at some point. I don't expect that to come from American Prairie because I don't gather that that's their culture there. But it will come from somewhere. And then we'll be back as if we don't have enough partisan cyclones of death that are afflicting our country right now. Now grazing on public land gets to become another one.
I'm not following you. What do you mean by there will be retribution? Come from where against what?
Sure.
I'm not sure.
So if the people who wanted the parties that wanted the grazing permits pulled from American Prairie because they didn't like that they had them, now you start the precedent of if I know the right guy and he's got the right levers to pull, and I'm upset at, let's say, the main organization that these people would be associated, these parties would be associated with. I don't like them. Now my buddy's in power, and guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to say maybe it's not the exact same attack, but it's a new one, right? I want those lease rates 10x. Yeah,
10X.
I want them way up.
On a par. Yeah, I want them on a par with the state. I'm tired of paying taxes to do this. That's what they're going to say.
Right, and so it's just this tit-for-tat battle that has now begun, and nobody wins. Nobody wins in that.
So let me jump in. What concerned me about this first, I happen to be a supporter of the American Prairie, and I have a reason for that. It's that in a world where the human populations are soaring, like the United States is twice as many people as when I was born. Mm-hmm. And like there's less prairie than there's ever been before because of agriculture and all that stuff. They're doing something that I think is very important, but that's just me. That's my opinion, right?
Right.
I like.
Yeah, and I'm biased. I'm biased. Yeah. I'll say it right now. I'm biased in favor of American Prairie. There's no doubt about it. And
they have a lot of land enlisted in the block management program, which means that public like myself can go hunting there.
Yep.
And that was not true, but at all when those ranches were in other hands.
Right.
So I have all these reasons for being biased, right?
Yeah.
However, I have an ideology as well, and I am, while I support a strong central federal government because I know the history of FDR and Teddy Roosevelt and what the government does, Eisenhower. The government accomplishes the Clean Water Act. I'm a supporter of the federal government.
Yeah.
However, I am a grave skeptic about government power. And that's why we have a Congress and a balance of powers. And this is a weaponization of the government's power against a single group that somebody simply didn't like.
Yeah.
And dude, that is the central point here for me. I wouldn't care if it wasn't AP of American Prairie. If it was somebody else that they had gone to and said, we're gonna take your grazing permits.
Yeah.
I don't care if that was my worst enemy. I would not celebrate that.
Yeah.
No way, man. That's the weaponization of government power against a target.
Yeah.
You
against
can't
a private
do that.
entity, yeah.
Man, Hal, you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
There's this.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
Well, the people listening know this story, but there's a building here in town that I hate, and I was joking with the mayor, obviously joking. I was
Whatever.
like,
You've been writing him letters every day, Nick.
Well, it's like a foreign entity owns it on the East Coast, and literally what they do is they inflated the value on their books, and they can borrow against it to do real estate on the East Coast, but it's on one of our main streets. It's this giant building with a green roof, and I was like, we should just 10x the taxes with giant buildings with green roofs because it's the only one in Knoxville, you know. And I'm like, yeah, but if I said that as a joke, if the government ever did that, even again, I would move out of that town right away because it's like, oh, this city's run by an oligarchy, and if I'm not in the picture, then I don't want any part of it.
And I don't know what your house looks like, but they'd be like jotting down like, house with a steel roof.
Yeah. And
that's why we don't do that.
And they have way more money. They have way more lobbying dollars.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
That company, they companies like that don't lose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They might lose a battle, but they win the war. And that's what this kicked off.
I want to half change the subject, just public land in general, right? The last year we've been talking on the podcast. You've been talking about it nonstop, and I'm grateful for that. A lot of the information I get about public land, what's happening, is from you. Our friends, Meat Eater, Mark Kenyon, Ryan Callahan, they've been blasting from the rooftops. We tried to inform our listeners as much as we could about what was going on with the boundary waters. Yep. And there's this quote unquote attack on public land. Now, I don't think that it's all this like, oh, cushy gushy, they're just trying their best over there. But I also don't think that the legislators are thinking, we just want to rip this from the public's. We don't want them being on it. We just want to hold this for ourselves. I don't think that's what they're thinking. They're probably thinking money. But could you walk us through that and what actually is going on? What's the threat? How is that different from traditionally how the government has treated public lands? Because I've never seen anything like it, in terms of what's going on. And now, to be fair, public lands is a weird conversation in Iowa and probably Illinois as well. Not as much in Minnesota because but we don't have any. We don't have any public land, so it's just a weird concept. It's like talking about salmon in the river. We're like, well, that sounds cool over there, but we don't have that,
I understood.
So,
elk hunting in Alabama.
Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So, what's happened? So, I'm finishing a 6-year project. I'm almost on the last chapter right now, and it's for Patagonia Publishing, and it's called Journeys on America's Public Lands. And so, in that 6 years, I was drawing on my whole life since I moved out west and in Alabama, where I was at the Bankhead National Forest, the Talladega National Forest, the Conecuh National Forest, but I never knew why we had them, right?
Right.
And so I kind of spent my life around this in the last 15 years. And it's a good time to have this knowledge, right? Because they're under threat as never before.
Yeah.
As all the conservation groups will say, and they're not kidding. It's true.
Yeah.
So what happened is there's 640 million acres of public lands in the United States. And that's wildlife refuge, national forest. National forest is about 193 million acres. BLM runs 240 million acres, manages. Now, those are lands owned by the American people, managed in trust by the federal government, federal agencies. Mm-hmm. And that dates back to 1891 with the first Forest Reserve Act, which President Harrison signed. And that was because of rampant deforestation. And they were worried about the first Forest Reserve Act actually was a buffer around Yellowstone National Park. If you know the history, 1872 was Yellowstone National Park, and then they realized that unless they had what became the Shoshone National Forest in Wyoming, that they wouldn't be able to save the game, the wildlife.
Sure.
And so that became the Yellowstone Timber Reserve in 1891. Okay. That was to buffer the national park.
Yeah.
And
wait, so BLM ground is in a trust, like a legal trust,
owned
by everyone who's an American citizen.
Owned by the American people, right?
I did not know that.
And managed in trust by the federal government. So here's the thing. So BLM lands a little different. So the Forest Service lands, if you look at the history, so one of the things they did was they picked out watersheds, and it's funny because the anti-public lands universe is headquartered in Salt Lake City. It's in Utah. They're the ones. Senator Mike Lee is the proponent of selling off all the public lands.
Right.
But Utah was one of the first places to embrace the concept of the national forest because it's a very arid place, right? And they depend on snowpack and snow melt for irrigation.
Okay.
And when those mountain lands were in just nobody's hands, people ran armies of sheep on them. They cut down as much timber as they possibly could because who's going to tell you to quit, right?
Right.
And they were having these huge erosion flood events where there's nothing to hold the dirt, and the dirt pours down into the valleys and stops up the irrigation. I'm oversimplifying it, and then people were setting fire to them to try to get better green up, right?
Oh, okay.
So they were burning them off, and they just weren't
an
holding
ecological
snow.
disaster area.
It was, and an ecological disaster area in Alabama or Mississippi where it actually rains.
Yeah.
Is not the same as not having a snowpack in a place that gets 11 inches of rain a year.
Yeah.
Right? There's no garden if the snow doesn't melt on time.
Yeah, we have a good friend here on the podcast, and he pointed out that a lot of the places people seek to live, you can only live there because of fossil fuels.
Yep.
And the places that especially in the West where that have held people prior to other than maybe coal on steam engines, the places that largely housed people before oil was around, is because they had that little ecological advantage, and to remove that, your margin of being able to survive there is so small that something like that now makes a whole area uninhabitable.
And that we were talking before you started recording about my town.
Mm-hmm.
My well and 52 other wells went dry here last summer.
That's so crazy.
And it was so hard, right? It was just so tough. We everybody drilled new wells, a little deeper, a little bigger. But you would not have this town if that continues.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, prior to about 1890, it was only the Blackfeet here. And when the creek went dry, they rolled up the teepee and got behind the horse and headed for the Marias River, right?
Yep.
So most of the West can be occupied nomadically forever. Like you could really, there would be no problem with coming here, hunting buffalo or catching some cows. When the creek gets too low, you roll up and book, right?
Yeah.
That's how it was done for 10,000 years.
Right.
The same way if we go back to Utah. Same way with Utah. The Utes, Southern Paiutes, all those people. They didn't just hang around when it didn't rain. They moved.
Right.
They left.
moved. Yeah. That's a great point.
They were just militarily strong enough to go places where there were, say, bison or something, right, and not be wiped out by the people who use that land.
Yeah.
So they kept a warrior culture, but it wasn't the only thing they did.
Right.
But they were able to. It was all nomadic, and if I'm reading Peter Stark's. I just interviewed Peter Stark about the Coronado expedition, and they ran into the Pueblo people in New Mexico. They thought they were going to get 7 cities of gold. And the Pueblo people were like, well, we don't really have any gold, but they had lived in that arid environment for thousands of years, but they're incredibly adapted. Like, it was super complicated how they lived there.
Yeah.
So if you go back to this, for the national forests were set aside specifically for watershed protection.
Yeah.
And that was to keep the goose laying the golden eggs of snowpack that was shaded by trees and in grass so that it didn't just run off with the dirt and the mud.
Yeah.
And then, so to come back east, in 1911, they passed the Weeks Act of 1911. And Weeks was a guy from New Hampshire who had witnessed, I think it was 554 billion board feet of lumber taken off.
Yeah.
And
that's crazy.
At that time, it was all free, right? So they just slicked it off and left. And they left a slash behind, which then caught fire in a way that a forest never would catch fire there, and it burned the dirt off. And so it wasn't coming back. Yeah. And one of the things that would happen then, people used grist mills a lot still, even in the 1880s and 90s.
Sure.
And the erosion would just fill up those reservoirs that ran the grist mills. So in one day, you're out of business. You don't have a steam shovel. You don't have a fossil fuel shovel. So you're out of business.
Yeah.
And so they had such erosion events that steamships were running aground in the Hudson River on the eroded topsoil from like the Adirondacks.
That is crazy.
And people are going, we're going to do something.
Yeah, my in-laws are from New Hampshire, and when I first went there the first time, they had said at one time, so today I believe New Hampshire's roughly 90% or maybe even 95% forested, and at one time it had been deforested to the point to where it was either 5 or 10% forested, 90 or 95% clear-cut farming.
Slicked off. Yeah, slicked off. And they farmed. It was the same old thing of conserve the best, farm the rest, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, farm the best, conserve the rest.
Yeah, you can still see all the stone walls everywhere through the timber where their fields were. I mean, hundreds of years old, these stone walls.
And that was the erosion problem there. Once you slicked off that timber, so that soil is forest soil versus like farming soil, which is down in the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And so John Weeks was from New Hampshire, and he had moved to Boston and made he was a really, really brilliant guy. He had made a fortune in banking or something, but he loved New Hampshire, and he came back to New Hampshire and looked at that deforestation and the erosion problems. And so he sponsored the Weeks Act of 1911. And that was to allow them to do in the East what Teddy Roosevelt and them had been doing in the West, which was conserve the high elevation snowpack country, which was the mountains, which, by the way, was not claimed because you can't homestead it. You can't live there. So this was land that had remained in the federal domain through all the Homestead Acts, right? The same thing with all the BLM land. It was unclaimed land. That's why it's managed by the BLM. If you could live on it and make a good living, it was claimed under the Homestead Act.
Right.
Did that make sense?
Yep.
Like, that's why Iowa doesn't have any.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was all good.
So you were saying that, so Mike Lee went after Utah, but Utah has this rich history of jumping in on the forested area as being publicly owned ground and in the best interest of the people. So what happened there?
So what happened there was they had one is to understand this. It's wonderful to understand American history because the Latter-day Saints has a direct conflict with the federal government from 1838, where Joseph Smith was actually assassinated right in the Carthage, Illinois.
Yeah.
And then they had to make the big trek to the west for religious freedom. Okay?
Yep.
So in 1859, they had made the trek west, and they had probably been, their tenacity is absolutely unquestioned. Those pioneers with the hand carts, settling the Great Salt Lake Valley and everywhere. I mean, it is an incredible story. So they actually went to war again with the U.S. government in 1859, and that was President Buchanan. And they just said this state, they called it the state of Deseret, and it was huge. It went from Oregon all the way down to northern Arizona. And they said, well, this is ours. We settled it, and this is ours. and we want to make a deal with the government and stuff. The government said no. And so, it's a long story short, they sent troops to Utah to do what's called the Utah War. And the Mormons, who had the Nauvoo Legion and Orrin Porter Rockwell, they had their own army, and
wow,
and they did very, very well. They also made this exodus that I don't think people appreciate enough to the fortress kind of southern Utah, where the soldiers couldn't get at them if they fought. And then, I'm from Alabama. We caused the Civil War, which caused the troops to have to come back from Utah, and nobody wanted that fight either. By the way, with the Latter-day Saints,
that is so interesting. I never knew of that.
Yeah.
I knew it was a contentious deal, and I knew about the Mountain Meadows massacre.
Yeah, and that was leading up to it.
Sure.
I've got a good friend who he has a daughter. We'll just keep it as she is highly accomplished and has great accolades from and post college. Moved out there and can't get a job, and she told her dad, "Well, I think it's because I'm not a Mormon." And he's
Gentile.
like, "How would they even know? That's illegal to bring up." And she's like, it has casually come up in every single interview. I've been, oh, where do you go to church? You know, just like a good old, and I mean, when I say decorated, she's decorated. You know, and there's no job she's not qualified to do basically in her industry, and so and she literally was like, I think I have to move because I am not part. I mean, it is a stronghold. And I'm not saying that's the case for everything, but they're tight knit. They are.
Well, and so that's one. So the history of their intact. They're you know, politically they called it a theodemocracy, right? A theodemocracy, and So, by the way, nobody wanted that Utah war. In fact, there was a guy, I think he was a Prussian general that was in the U.S. cavalry, and he jumped ship and immediately became a Latter-day Saint. He was like, "This is great," and so nobody wanted that fight. So, and it's lucky that we didn't have to do. Nobody had to do that, right? So they pulled the troops back.
Nothing but ugliness in those situations.
But for them, that conflict with the federal government has never really ended, and they and so they don't like it. What precipitated that conflict was Gentiles that moved there to run the new territory of Utah, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, "We're not listening to you. You're not from here. You didn't settle this, you know."
Right.
And so that conflict has its roots really early, and when the BLM tells somebody that they can't run cows in the desert outside of, say, Escalante, Utah, that conflict rises back up.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you think that Mike Lee's kind of it was fueled by agenda, for whatever reason, the agenda of the Latter-day Saints?
Not really. Nowadays, it's fueled by money.
Oh, okay.
And about 40% of the Utah legislature is involved in the real estate business in some way. And so the legislature...
That seems unbiased.
Yeah, well, they want that. They want that land, right? They want to develop, even though they don't really have the water resources for it. They want the option to build out St. George out onto what's now BLM. And they can't believe that the federal government would tell them that they can't build a new housing development east of St. George. And down inside this is the old federal conflict.
Yeah. Interesting.
But you're telling us what to do.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not about. I thought you were going to bring up Trump's like drill baby drill or this whole like AI thing with mining data, but you're saying it is just like a 2 centuries old feud between two people groups.
It's rooted in that.
Interesting.
You know, and nowadays I think that people in Utah too appreciate the public lands, and I think Senator Mike Lee is in a distinct minority in wanting to privatize public lands in Utah. Yeah, I really do.
Public people can't make politicians rich. Only special interest groups can make them rich.
Correct.
You know? So, okay, well then, what about just getting kind of political here, but Doug Burgum, and the things that he's brought up, and he's talked about the asset book of the United States being trillions of dollars, you know, and these just quantifying the public lands and that kind of language. And my understanding is most of what he's gone after is less about selling and more about leasing out what we currently have for mining or extraction. You know, we were talking about. What have you seen with him and what he's been pushing and these leases that he's been talking about?
Well, most of the oil and gas resources have long been leased, like they're already under lease. So, an explosion of leases is kind of hyperbole. Now, the mining leases, when they're talking about repealing the national monument status of Bears Ears or Grand Staircase Escalante, that would be a big deal.
Yeah,
because there's coal in the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, and so that would be a huge deal. What I see with Doug Burgum is he came out of North Dakota. He did a pretty good job managing the Bakken oil field boom. So he know what he knows is oil and gas. What he knows is extractive industry.
Yeah.
And people will get mad at me for saying this, but like under Clinton, he had one of my favorite Secretary of Interiors, Bruce Babbitt. And Bruce Babbitt was the Babbitt Ranches out of Arizona, and he was also like really conservation minded. Mm-hmm. So he did a lot of things that extractive industry didn't like, including a lot of national monument declarations and so Doug Burgum is the opposite extreme.
Yeah.
And Secretary Watt under Ronald Reagan was the opposite extreme. Secretary Gail Norton under George Bush 43 was the opposite extreme. They didn't prioritize conservation at all.
Yeah.
And so and this is kind of a Republican issue, I guess. The Republicans don't have a good track record of doing even pragmatic conservation. They have kind of a smash and grab model that I don't think most Americans actually support if you really if you really knew about it, right? If you really thought about it. But Doug Burgum is the opposite extreme.
I think I disagree with you on that. I'm not trying to defend the Republican Party at all. I think most Americans, like if you just percentage-wise, if you said like what matters to you here, they would go, well, how expensive is my gas going to be?
Yeah.
Am I going to have enough? Is there going to be enough surplus that I'll be able to make my kids' sports tournaments this weekend, or am I going to be able to fly to see my in-law? Like that? Yeah. Or like how expensive is milk or eggs going to? That's what they're thinking. Is my Netflix account going to go up? And so now what you could do is subsect and say like, any American who's ever visited a national park, because if you get them to a national park, the percentage chance that they care, I'm willing to bet, is dramatically higher. But I think Doug Burgum or the Republican Party's view on these things is on these public lands is more of a symptom of the people that are around that are, as Kent and I say, numbers people, or Doug says always counting. People that are always counting.
Right. Well, let me think of that. How did the increase of leasing on public land for oil and gas affect your gas price at the pump?
I don't know.
Well, in 2015, Congress overturned the petroleum export ban and began putting the petroleum on trucks and on trains to take it out of the United States. So I think that people who believe in who think that smash and grab say what happened on the Pinedale Anticline, where they put 3,000 wells out there in the Mule Deer Winter Range for natural gas, and then just kind of have they don't have any reclamation. They've got roads everywhere, invasive weeds. They've sacrificed all the other resources to extract this one, and I don't think that made people's natural gas any cheaper. So if we get through the kind of goal-oriented propaganda here, we would understand that using extractive energy in the least impactful way possible, which is more expensive for the company, is also the long-term solution to our price of eggs. Because what we're talking about with say, the development of having 3,000 abandoned oil and gas wells in the Powder River Basin in Wyoming that are leaking methane and doing whatever to the minimal aquifer that's there, that's creating a debtor's prison for our children. That is not going to help the price of eggs tomorrow. So people have linked, the people who want to do this and not do it right, which costs more money, have linked the price of eggs and your gas to go to the wrestling tournament. I think of when, I can't remember when it was $4 and something, and all my kids were wrestling. It was like, we would sit there at the pump at 6 o'clock in the morning and just shake with the credit card, right?
Yeah.
But that was during the height of the Bakken.
Oh,
I wasn't getting any of that oil. So I think we should detach those.
Yeah, and we're seeing that very immediately with the Boundary Waters deal. Wait, who's the mining company? Wait, where are the minerals going? Oh,
right, Chile.
Yeah.
Well, on the global market, right? Has Iowa have the local communities in Iowa prospered from the allowing that level of water pollution that y'all have?
Oh, Iowa, the most prosperous GDP positive state.
Yeah.
We're one of 2 states that have had a negative GDP the last 2 years, and I think what you said is perfect with corn, because we could do corn well. We would just have to do a lot less of it and less intensely. Right. And we could either have more money today, or we can have, money long term. And I don't know if you remember that study that was done with the kids and the marshmallow, and it said that a bunch of little kids were put, I think 4, 5, 6 years old, put in a room, a marshmallow. And the people said, all right, I'm going to come back in 5 or 10 minutes. And if this marshmallow is still here, I'm going to give you 2 marshmallows. And the kids who ate it and then the kids who didn't eat it were both tracked throughout their future. And the kids who ate it struggled by quite a margin compared to the kids who didn't eat it and were able to do that delayed gratification. And we're just the kid who ate the marshmallow, man, just the whole, as a country.
Yeah. I agree to an extent with that, Nicholas. However, I think, let's go back to the public lands versus cheap gas. I think if you said, let's take Knoxville, Iowa. I'd say Knoxville, Iowa represents your average American town. And if you went to the average Knoxvillan, and is that what you guys call yourselves, Knoxvillans? If you went to the average Knoxvillan and said, you can have cheaper gas. I agree with Hal. The economics do not trickle down in that way when it comes to the extractive nature of how our economy works now. So directly. So let's say it did. If you could have cheaper gas, but we're going to sell off this piece of BLM ground that you've never heard of, I agree with you, Nick. You would have probably most people who have no above average interest in recreating or spending any time on that BLM. They'd probably yeah, sure, deal. If you started saying okay, we're going to sell the Everglades and you're going to have cheaper gas, they'd probably be well, we're going to sell Yellowstone National Park. We're going to sell Yosemite. We're going to sell. You start naming those, and I think you'll find that a lot of people who are we'll say, maybe they're low middle class or don't even quite qualify for middle class. I think they're gonna have a limit with what they're willing to, what of their American, public landowner birthright that they have, that they're going to be willing to sell for that cheaper gas. I think that the reason that we have a lot of the things that we have, even though hunting is a perfect example of that. Roughly, I think it's 4% of the population. Is that right, Hal?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's
yet
really low.
And yet we still have the right to do so. And there's a very strong anti-hunting voice out there who act in an organized way to try and take those rights away. But yet the bulk of the population is who allows hunting to stay, and they don't even hunt themselves. And so I think people do. We should give people. Yes, we should definitely call out the depravity of the human condition, but I think that the people do deserve a little more credit for valuing these things more so than we realize.
Yeah, but I think part of it's a PR thing. Think about if we tried to rally behind cockroaches like we did the butterfly. People would be like, psh, gross, whatever. Yeah. But the butterfly is very easy to rally behind. The Everglades, Yellowstone National Park, Glacier National.
But that's my point. Yeah, that's my point. Is those things are shiny enough, and that not just because a lot of those people, lower middle class, haven't been to Glacier National Park. They haven't been to Yellowstone, but they know inside of them that that right there, that's valuable. That's a that's a
100%
coin that I got to hang on to. It's not just because of the advertising.
No, I think, but here's where I would say the difference is everything you said, I totally agree with. I think, but in order for people to care about the county parks or the non-known state parks, the places that a lot less people do and only a small handful of local people show up. If people go to a national park, they see the value of the public land and they'll care about it even down to a county level. But if people never go, they'll be like, oh yeah, we got to keep Yellowstone. We got to keep the Redwood Forest. Those are crazy. They're iconic. We love those. But if you said like, yeah, but what about the 86-acre county prairie?
I said that in the first part. I agree with you that there's that there's a percentage of the land that people who have no connection to public land, no deep or meaningful connection, they would be okay with selling their birthright to have cheaper gas over it. But I think that there still is a big part of people of being an American that has a value for those publicly held resources, and it would take an unimaginable price for them to sell it.
At Hoxie Native Seeds, our mission is to provide native seed and education for landowners and land managers that care about their ground. So the education, we're doing that through the podcast and interviewing experts and the stuff we put out through our website. But the native seed that we provide, whether we grew it or we work with other producers that grew it, we are here to provide that for you. It's what keeps the lights on for us, and it's what we love to do. Most of our seeds grown right here on our farm, HoxieNativeSeeds.com. Oh, and if you need a little help with consultation, not sure what to put on your ground, we would be happy to help you with that as well. Give us a call, HoxieNativeSeeds.com.
But they're okay with the National Park Service budget being slashed.
Right,
over and over again. Well, I don't understand that. I don't see how those jive. What I think maybe is that people, here's what I keep coming back to. If you inherit, like my sisters and I did, 136 acres, split 5 ways, it wasn't worth enough to be life-changing money. Mm-hmm. But once it was gone, we're never going to get it back. None of us have made the kind of money to buy another 136.
Right.
So we made the decision to keep that, and we argue about it a lot too. And
I'm sure.
This is a microcosm of the American public lands.
Yeah.
And but divested of that asset, we have very little, like almost nothing. And I think that all of us would be shocked at how impoverished we felt after that was gone, and we can't go there anymore.
Yeah.
And this is why I think I want to go back with the Latter-day Saints stuff. I think that's coming around. I think that old conflict is kind of coming around in Utah amongst a lot of people because they are starting to see what would happen to the Red Rock Country or the Wasatch Range or the Utahns or the Dixie National Forest if the federal government didn't own it.
Right.
And I don't think that they would be well served like your average guy. Maybe goes to church every Sunday at Latter-day Saints and stuff, and he knows the history. Mm-hmm. And he's like me and you. He's a skeptic of the federal government's power.
Yeah.
He should be, right? Yeah. Or she should be. But they also recognize that that federal ownership of the Dixie National Forest is, for all its conflicts, for all its fallibility, is the best outcome for Utah.
Right.
And I'm thinking just state, right? And the Shoshone National Forest in Wyoming is simply, if you weighed out all the evidence, Gifford Pinchot, first chief of the Forest Service, said the greatest good for the greatest number. And that changed a lot over time, right? Because people started learning about ecology and endangered species and hunting. Mm-hmm. You know, when he said that, people hunted a lot, but it wasn't a conservationist thing. And the Shoshone National Forest was a solution. At one point, Pinchot pointed out that if you were going to continue to homestead the lands in Wyoming, which almost all of them fail, by the way, down there in that sagebrush, right? And they reverted to the federal government because people abandoned them. But we'll talk about Eastern Montana on that too. So what he said was, They are taking this was tie hackers. They were cutting them for railroad ties.
Okay.
And they're cutting these lodge poles that take about 100 years to grow.
Yeah.
And he said they are taking the railroad ties off what would become the Shoshone National Forest. They're taking those at such a rate that if a homesteader files a claim and takes over some free government land, they're not even going to be able to build a corral. There's not going to be any timber anywhere for them.
Yeah.
And so the Shoshone National Forest was in part set up so that it could provide a sustainable level of timber to people who needed to build a cabin or a corral.
Yeah.
Well, two points here and a question for you. I looked it up. The average forest ranger or park ranger in the United States makes $21 an hour. I feel like that's 3 times as much as they should be. I think we should be slashing those numbers.
Slash them, yeah.
It's only, it's about 43 to 46. I don't know what their overtime looks like. $1,000 a year, which is you either better live alone or you better have a spouse that has a good job.
Most of that's seasonal.
Yeah.
Most of that would be seasonal. Yeah.
And so even the top earners are 60 to 70, which if you're making big decisions for 100 employees under you, 60 to 70 is just not where we should be as an economy. But I do have a question for you, and Kent and I have talked about this. We haven't brought it up on the podcast at all. What is good extraction? There's mining, there's mining, there's drilling for oil, there's drilling into the aquifers with the wells. There's I know you've talked about grazing. There's good ways to do grazing, but people aren't prepared for us to be like, yeah, we're not doing any mining. And so you've seen it done. I imagine you've even been to some of the places. What does good extraction look like, and can it be done with some of these more toxic situations like copper or mining for coal or
Well, so personally, I don't think I've ever seen. I worked as a mine reclamation laborer when I was in my 20s, and I've been to coal mines, gold mines, all that. I've never seen low impact mining. Okay. However, that doesn't mean that you don't need silver, gold, and copper, right?
Yeah.
Good extraction is a process that doesn't leave a mess for other people to clean up, and is done with the lowest impact possible. And that's true of timbering. Grazing's a little different because you can manage grazing in a way that doesn't have a long-term reduction in the carrying capacity of that land. That's all I would say for grazing is are we doing it in a way that does not reduce the long-term carrying capacity of that land? And then you can have the wildlife advocates and the hunting people and everything step in and say, well, we want this, right? But if that land is public, then we all have a say in what happens there. And I believe in conflict. Nicholas, this is a big thing for me. I believe that people should get in a room and, once it goes to violence, the biggest, baddest idea wins, right? They just smash you in the face. Like in Putin's Russia, you don't get to argue your point. During the Liberian Civil War, I had this woman told me in Africa, she's from Liberia, and she just said, you argue with a rebel, it's bang, you're done. There's no rational argument. There's no way you present your case. But within the structure of the United States, the way we built it with litigation, the judicial part of it all, we all have a say, and it's totally irritating, right? Here's this guy who likes snapdragons, and he can't stand it that we're logging this place where these snapdragons live, and he's going crazy over it, and he sues us, and we're furious because all we want to do is get some timber out and employ Joe and Bill, right? But that kind of conflict has been very beneficial to our country. It's given the chance for good ideas to take root and for somebody to go, okay, well, we can log off that and leave those snapdragons over here. And then it turns out that was a good idea anyway. And the conflicts over grazing, to me, the anti-grazing groups, okay, people get so irritated at them, right? But they have a function to play here. Yeah. It's like let the ideas compete, right? let the conflict be. And let's argue over. So the boundary waters thing with the Superior National Forest, that was a mining lease that they took away. They removed the leasing from that area because it was deemed as to be so important to that watershed that you couldn't do it without jeopardizing the watershed.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just said, well, that's not happening anymore. We're putting the leasing back. And they did that again through government fiat. We didn't have a big meeting where we said 100 people got together from there and said, can this be done without wrecking the place? They didn't do that. They merely signed a paper. That's not really an American way of doing stuff, man.
Yeah.
That's again, the government has a function, and we all know that.
Yep.
But the government, it's like balance. You can never trust that they'll do the right thing. You have to constantly be holding them accountable.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
The second, I think a lot of times we view the government as it's only self-regulative, by the balance of the three branches.
Right.
And we forget that there's a fourth branch, and that's us, the voter. And the sooner we get bored with all of this, the sooner that we stop caring. And I hear so often, and I get it, and I've been this way myself before, so I'm not trying to pass judgment, but I think it's an unhelpful way to look at things. I hear so often people say, it's just so negative. I don't pay attention to politics anymore.
For sure.
I don't pay attention. I don't follow the news. I just do my own happy little thing over here. And you can do that, and a certain chunk of people can do that. But if everyone, it's like when you're in school and you're so thankful, you're annoyed by them, but you're so thankful for the teacher's pet kids because they're the ones that go out for all school senate, and they get on the student council, and they make sure that you still have prom and that you have the fun around homecoming week, and you're like, yeah, you know what? I am thankful for that kid. They're annoying as anything, but I'm glad that they exist because I have zero interest in doing any of that extra work, and I just want to do my own thing over here. And we carry that mentality on with us into life. And if we all think that we can just hide in our own little hole and let the powers that be duke it out, and we're going to be good with what comes out of that, you might be, but you're going to gradually, as you hand more power and more control over to those other branches, you're going to be left with something eventually. And by saying I might be talking about your grandkids are going to be left with something that you would not have been okay with. And so I think it is important that we stay informed on these things and that we stay active as the fourth branch of government, being the voter. And what I think is far more powerful than sitting on the other side of the aisle and having somebody who you don't agree with as your elected official and saying, I don't like it that you do that. Well, their answer is going to be, of course you don't. You're a Republican and I'm a Democrat. Right. But it's when you're a Democrat and your elected official is also a Democrat and you say, hey, look, I voted for you. And it was my understanding that when you ran, you said you were going to be for this and not for this, and you've done the exact opposite.
I think we're going to have a lot of those emails about water quality, I'm afraid of it.
As your constituent, as someone who's voting for you, I don't plan to vote for you again if I don't see some serious change here. And to offer that kind of a critique is going to be meaningful. And yet I just don't think people make social media posts or they go on a podcast like we're doing right now and they run their mouth for a while like I'm doing. But until you actually interface with the people who are really making the decisions and let them know that you're watching and that you're voting accordingly, and then you can say, by the way, I have X number of followers on social media and I'm going to be talking about it there too. Or I have this kind of a reach wherever, and I'm going to be talking about it there too. Now it's time well, maybe I should pay attention to what my constituents think. And I just think that, if we disinvolve ourselves, no matter how much we think the fight is out of control, we will confirm that by further disinvolving ourselves.
Yeah, and I want to make the point, we've talked about this before, it is not that hard to just have a list on your iPhone of names and emails of everyone that represents you. I mean, it's like it might feel overwhelming because you're seeing ads for all this stuff, but the truth of the matter is, at a state and federal level, the people that represent you, there's like 12. You know what I mean? There's not that many. And then just make a habit. I remember my history teacher said, I send our representatives an email every week. That's a lot. He's the teacher's pet. But
I guarantee you they listen. I guarantee you they consider that guy, though. You know what I mean? Because they're like, oh, it's Jim again. You know? Yeah.
Well, and he's intelligent, and he's not a name caller, and he's a good dude. And but also, if they hear from you regularly and you're thought out, and you just once a quarter or once a month, the truth is it's not that hard. But you'd be shocked how many people don't even show up to vote. I just think, it's laziness to me. It's just laziness.
Well, it's a participatory democratic republic.
Yeah.
And that requires that people participate.
Yeah.
What I've tried to do with this research and stuff is try, especially with this public lands thing, is just try to remind people, my fellow Americans, of how many successes and how hard won most of them were that we have inherited.
Yeah.
And when people talk to me about, I'm glad they're talking about the Taylor Grazing Act right now with this American Prairie thing, because the Taylor Grazing Act was what has happened in 1934, right? This is the height of the Dust Bowl.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And people are going, how do we solve this problem? Well, they didn't solve it forever.
Yeah.
It was a damn good idea to do what they did. And there was a lot of people that didn't want them to do it. They were like, no, I don't want that. That's ridiculous. The government can't do nothing right. How many times have I heard that, right?
Right.
And then I'm sitting there, I'm driving down the highway to get my mail, and there's no bandits attacking. And I've got a job where I've got, some money in my pocket. My kids are healthy.
Yeah.
They're going to wrestling practice, or my son works in the Owyhee Desert as a cowboy, right?
Wow.
That's all this public leasing. My daughter is working at a vet clinic in Bozeman. They're good, right? Things are good. Well, they're not good by accident. They're not good because somebody just goes like, you can't do nothing right.
Yeah, right.
It's crazy, man.
And,
and I look at the depression through the Dust Bowl, and the government did a lot. My grandfather hated FDR. I'm not sure why. He was an old Alabama guy, but my grandfather was. But FDR and them, they used an activist federal government to fix a lot of stuff.
Right.
And then they set in motion a lot of these farm programs now that have become wrong. Right. And my belief that from FDR is that those programs should have sunsetted and been reevaluated for their effectiveness after the Dust Bowl was over. Right. But we have, let me go you one in eastern Montana out there where the AP is, in that country, there's this thing called the Bankhead-Jones land. And that was Senator Bankhead from Alabama.
Yeah.
And that was called the Bankhead-Jones Farm Tenant Act. It was in 30s, 27, May 30. No, it was after the Dust Bowl. So, the 30s. And that was to allow the federal government to retake ownership. This would be the public land, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at a USGS map, these lands are pink, and there's lots of them. There's some in New Mexico. There's a lot in eastern Montana. Those were lands abandoned by homesteaders after they had plowed them. They were starving to death. There was no way you could grow wheat in that alkali country. So they had gotten off the train. They had claimed their land. They'd plowed it. They'd lived. They'd done everything they could, and they just left. So there, at that time, there was, say, 5,000 head of livestock, like plow horses,
right? Yeah,
abandoned in Phillips County alone.
That's crazy.
That's where the AP has got a lot of land, the American Prairie.
Yeah,
5,000 head of livestock just out there starving. So this was around. So we missed the Dust Bowl here, and that's because it stopped raining here around 1917. And so by the time 1933, they left. They already left.
There to create it.
They already left. And so by 1933, which at that time was the hottest year on record, right? The homesteaders that boom had ended in eastern Montana, where the American Prairie is now. It is totally interesting. And the Bankhead-Jones lands reverted to federal ownership. And that allowed the taxpayers in New York City and Alabama and Texas and all to pool our money, and they could replant that. And unfortunately, they put crested wheatgrass on it. Yeah. What they did was they put whatever they could on it to hold the dirt, and to get the restoration started. Yep. Okay, so I don't know who Jones was, but Bankhead was a senator from Alabama. And they were having the same problems. You can't believe it, but some of the biggest erosion gullies in America are in Alabama.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's where the sharecroppers cut down the forest because they didn't have any other land, and they farmed that, and it just washed away. It gets 54 inches of rain a year, right? So all of it just washed away. So Senator Bankhead knew a lot about this, and they created the Farm Tenant Act, the Bankhead-Jones Act, and that was used in New Mexico and Montana. It wasn't needed as much in Alabama. Yeah. The Bankhead National Forest, the Talladega National Forest, Tuskegee National Forest were all taken by the federal government under the Weeks Act because of the erosion. They were basically uninhabitable. So he knew a lot about this. So dig this. We solved a problem that goes back to the Roman Empire of land degradation. And we did that through the federal government and through voters who elected Senator Bankhead and whoever Senator Jones was. Yeah. And we solved a problem that had stumped human civilizations for millennia. I mean, and the other thing about public lands is when you were in England and the king forbids you to hunt the king's deer.
Right,
you couldn't get in Sherwood Forest or we'll hang you, right?
Right.
So the only place those people, so they had cut down all the yew trees to get longbows for the English army, right? Mm-hmm. So nobody could get any bow wood. And so, you might already know this, but in the cemetery in Europe, in England, there are yew trees, huge yew trees, some of the oldest ones in existence. And they're there because the cemetery was the only place that the public had access to where they could get a piece of bow wood and make a bow. Wow. So when they created that situation, which was done through 1604, they started the Enclosure Acts. And all the peasants and all the serfs, my people, were in there, and they're going you can't live here anymore. We're enclosing it. That drove 1604, right? 1780 through 1789. That drove the people to the United States.
Yeah.
To what became the United States.
A place to have somewhere to live. Place to have some land.
Yes, and then in 1891, we said, wow, that Enclosure Act stuff, somebody remembered it. Somebody was smart. They knew history. They said, that didn't work out so well. Let's have a national forest.
Yeah.
Wow. So,
and I can't believe that we would repeat the Enclosure Acts in the United States of America in 2026.
Oh, we're all goldfish.
Yeah.
The memory of a goldfish.
Yes.
Hey, we do need to start wrapping up, but there was one thing you said before we started that I really want to hear your opinion on. You were saying that our public lands, the lands that we decide we're going to put resources into taking care of, are the arc of the future. Could you unpack that? I did not fully understand what you were saying.
Yeah. So in my lifetime, I was born in 1964. So the population of the United States was 180 then. and I think it's 360 now, maybe whatever.
Wow.
And so
I've been saying 330 for a long time, and
yeah.
that's
well,
just not accurate
if you
anymore.
look at the figures, the legal immigration figures from 2000 to now, they're really high. And so so even population aside, we have an opportunity on these public lands. We have an opportunity on private land even more, but you and I can't affect that.
Right.
Right? So like people that like the Nature Conservancy or Ted Turner did it, right? But you and I don't have a say in it.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about ecological diversity being the priority.
Yeah.
But we have a chance here to manage land, and we're still going to extract. I still want timber. I still want minerals, and I still want oil and gas. I just want it. I want it produced without sacrificing all the other resources. And where possible, see, when I saw the cutting of the budgets for the Forest Service, the Doge.
Yeah.
I saw that, and the national parks too. But my purview really is Forest Service, BLM. I don't know that much about the parks, but when I saw those budgets being cut, I was like, this is the exact opposite of what I would do, knowing what I know. When we could do huge scale fuels reduction to reduce forest fires, that costs a lot of money.
Yeah. And
the beauty of that is, I'm speaking from bias again. I was a contractor on public lands for 28 years. That was part of my income when I wasn't writing. I did everything from trails to thinning timber to control burns to climbing trees for pine cones, whatever.
Sure.
So I believe in local rural employment. I really believe in rural economic development. And I would have liked a bunch of kids in my town to have a job on the Forest Service. They would be trained to run a chainsaw or whatever and do thinning and fuels reduction. So you would maximize your land resilience and your watersheds and biodiversity as well.
Yeah.
And we would be building a future that the population will eventually go down, whether it does or not, I don't know. But we will be building a future that our grandchildren can be proud of.
Yeah.
And they can talk about us. Like all these people go, have you heard Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac? And I was like, yes, I have. And I love that book. And I said, but the thing is he's been dead for like 80 years.
Yeah, 70, 80 years, yeah.
And so I want our grandchildren in the United States of America to quote us.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to be the person who knew that this was the thing to do that would best make, say, in Utah, for instance, where they're having incredible water problems, and we'll have to fight the AI data center stuff. We'll fight. That's the fight of the hour, the crazy whatever it is going to be. I don't even understand it. But if you were to really, I believe that those lands belong to the American people and should be held in our public hands. Yeah. Managed by the federal government. We'll argue over their management, and we'll create some resources while building this powerful ecosystem services is the catchword, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that's true. Our rangelands should be in the best shape they've ever been, with the science and the understanding that we've built over the last 150 years.
Yeah.
But they're not. They're not. But they should be, and they could be.
Mm-hmm. Is it just there's no money being funneled in to do the practices that are needed?
That's part of it. That we have not prioritized these things, and it's the same thing. It's one. It's the marshmallow issue, for sure, and the other is that we as a people don't know really where our bread is buttered. And so we prioritize kind of things that don't matter as much without remembering that nothing we do exists without topsoil and rain and grass. And like this place I live, it's really perfect for converting sunlight and grass to good meat.
Yeah.
It's not so great for growing wheat, but you can do it. But it's a place, and that's been a priority here because we have so much ranching, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I just think people have gotten very abstract. And like in Utah, if people remembered why they set up the Wasatch National Forest in the first place,
yeah,
this argument over the public lands, which may be rooted in old animosities to the federal government, but it would settle out of sheer pragmatism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And that has to do with the ark, by the way. The ark also carries the fresh water that we need to survive.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, it's a sobering thing to think about, and one of the most complicated aspects of it is our human population, and I don't speak for both of you, but I think you both agree that depopulating our own species is not the answer to solving this. I think and it's important to say that, because that is a criticism that people who are against they call it, what do they call it, the environmental movement, or just conservation ideals, right? I had a friend send me a text recently who's not, he's a friend from college. He's not anti-conservation. He's conservation agnostic, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't know if I should have my daughters who are in Girl Scouts march in the the Earth Day parade, because isn't that kind of like an anti-human movement? And I don't know enough about Earth Day. I know it was set up, when was it, in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, something like that. And so I don't know enough.
The river was on fire.
Yeah.
The Ohio River was on fire or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know if maybe at some point someone within the Earth Day movement made a speech or something that got them that I've never heard that before. But that criticism, and I don't believe that it has been associated with that. And I had a response for him that I will not share here. But it had to do with some other anti-human in practice as opposed to in theory, things that have gone on that I didn't hear him worried about. But the point is, that is a real criticism that gets thrown out. And I've even been in a room and had a conversation with another conservationist, and I said, now we want to make sure that this isn't where, what we're not saying, right? And their answer was kind of like, do we? And it's like, so there are people in the to be fair, in the conservation space who have an anti-human bent to them. And
I want to break it down.
Let me finish here though. Don't let me talk about a super controversial thing and not finish my statement. That's dangerous territory, especially when you're making the reels, Nick. I think it's so important though that we do not represent that, and we don't. It's not something hidden in the closet that, now that you've followed our ways, time for the great depopulation. No, I think we need human life is the most valuable thing we can imagine, and that we have, and we need to find a way to have both a healthy human population and a world that can support them, and a lot of that starts with what Nick was talking about earlier. With we just consume so much on an individual basis that we got to look for the places where the surplus, the gross waste, right? It's okay to have some surplus. That's the difference between surviving and thriving, right? Is that you got enough in your storehouses for when the thin times come. But there's also, you look around us, we have so much surplus that a lot of us are wearing that surplus every day. And
wearing that corn syrup.
That's right. Wearing that corn syrup.
Yeah.
Well, and so to your point, Kent, very basic macro econ for people listening is our debt. We have decided as a society we're going to live in debt, which basically says I want it today, I'll pay for it tomorrow. Right? As a whole, as a society, we've decided that. And part of the math that makes debt work is we are figuring the world will get, or the technology will get more efficient, and or there will be more humans to take on that increasing debt load. So it's still
the grow out of the debt idea, right?
And so that's fine. I don't love it, but that's fine. So if you had less people, but you have just as much consuming, you still have the same. You still have you have a civilization collapsing debt load.
Yeah.
If it just skyrockets like that. But if you just decide today that you're going to consume less, and we have the same amount of humans, that actually solves the problem. That actually would take care of it long term. And it's not like 3% in the margins we could get rid of. We could, like, 50% of what we consume could be. I'm not saying we have to do that. I agree with you, Ken. It's okay to have some surplus.
What percentage of food is thrown away again?
I just looked it up. The United States produces but right under 4,000 calories per person per day, and the average American needs about 2,100 calories. So where does all that go?
Yeah.
It's either wasted because we ate it and we did not need it at all, or it's wasted because literally it gets thrown away. And it's over half of it gets, over half of our waste gets thrown away. And of that, I think, an extra 400 calories gets eaten a day, which is not nothing, And so
not over a year.
That over time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's fascinating. So you're talking about in this, it's like, these are individual choices, though, because I don't think the government could have the power, like you'd be talking about, like Maoism or something, to make everybody like have less.
Right. Yeah. It's got to be
we're not into individual.
That. No, I know, and so these have to be. What I would think about this too is like using self-discipline and living that life of say, what do I need versus what do I want.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about before we started recording that I'm not sure that all this like incredible profligate like stuff has made us any happier,
Right.
But as an individual, like you choose this more minimal life where things that matter. I always think about that word, the verities.
Yeah.
Like how much time do I have to spend with my kids? Can we go fishing and eat fish out of the river because they're not polluted?
Yeah.
Can we spend a week working on say softball?
Right.
Verities versus like overabundance. And then you run into people though who they have like that hungry ghost, right? And they just gotta have the new truck or they're unhappy. And they've got like where I grew up, they're building these houses that must be 5,500 square feet. And you think, man, they must have like 6 kids. They don't. They have 1.
Yeah.
And like, where did that happen?
Yeah.
Like, is that a hungry ghost thing that drives people, or?
I listened to this podcast called My First Million, and it sounds like just a greedy podcast. The two hosts, they're really balanced guys. I really like them, and they will ask people, how do you kill the money monster? They call it a money monster, right? Because a lot of times entrepreneurs are driven just by more, There are some entrepreneurs who are driven by, like, there's a problem and they want to solve it, which goes all the way back to one of our first episodes with Tabitha Panis. Don't follow your dreams. Look at a problem and solve it. More satisfaction will come from solving a problem in your life that took quite a bit of compute and quite a bit of energy to solve than any Disney World, any dream job, anything like that could you have the most satisfaction to take on that responsibility and solve it. And so there are some entrepreneurs that do that, but a lot of them are just driven by more, and they get 10 million in their bank account and they talk about it. I get 10 million in my bank account, it's not enough. And there was this census that was taken where it's like how much money would make you happy, and no matter how much money they had in their bank account, their answer was 2 to 3 times how much they had. So if they had $1 million, well, if I had $2 or $3 million or made 2 or 3 times as much, and they would give specific numbers. They didn't say 2 or 3 times as much. That was just how it ended up mapped out. And you're right. There's a money monster ghost inside of us. And that's our tagline's conservation happens one mine at a time. If we can't kill that hungry, never-ending vortex inside of our humanity, the Earth's screwed. It really is. We can go do all the policy. We could become communists, and the government decide everything. We are screwed if humans as a whole we can't figure that out.
Well, look at how badly that went. Like where the government got everybody. Now you eat 2 chickens and 4 potatoes.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon, that's Animal Farm, right?
Yeah.
That Orwell book is just like, it comes to me all the time now.
Yeah.
2 legs, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just the central theme to all of this. If you have to fight for what's good, and you can't give up on that, and you can't get lazy with it. And you have to recalibrate to know what's good, and then continue fighting. And
I just say apprise oneself as an American, and because we are very, even if you're really poor, living in this country is still pretty privileged. It's still a privilege, even though even if you're struggling, and so we need a lot of changes. But we always have, right? It's the American experiment, right? It's not like a done deal. And but I would apprise oneself when y'all were talking about that local park, Land and Water Conservation Fund, which was passed in 1964, was one of the most visionary funding mechanisms for open space parks, ball fields, swimming pools for lower income Americans, right? And I always think about this because one of the things they want to do, they go, why would Land and Water Conservation Fund, which takes from revenues from offshore oil and gas and puts them into a general fund for funding like open space and projects for small towns mostly, and they do a lot of public land stuff. But there was a lot of swimming pools in the 1950s and early 60s that were paid for in the Great Plains region by Land and Water Conservation Fund. And they were like, why are they doing that? Well, part of it was military preparedness. They wanted kids to be like strong and healthy and run around. And the Navy wanted kids that could swim.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and a really early version, when CRP, Erodible Cropland Program became CRP in 1985. Because I was like 20 years old. We put some land in what was ERP. And that also had a national security deal, was they wanted that marginal land to be fallowed, and they would pay the landowner to fallow that land. And it was called Conservation Reserve Program in 1985. Before it was Erodible Cropland Program, right?
Sure.
To take erodible lands out. But part of that was also if the United States got into a siege warfare, and you needed every acre, you could break that out and feed the people, and we would withstand the enemy.
That is so interesting.
It's and so like, man,
makes sense.
We have solved all these problems. Like I want people to go back and look at why we have what we have. When I go elk hunting west of my house, and I drive through giant ranches where I cannot go, I can't even stop the truck and cross the fence. And then I get to the national forest and I can go elk hunting for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yep.
And until I was about 37 years old, I never even asked why that was.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point. And I think it goes so hand in hand with what, Nicholas, you were talking about, with people being satisfied with less of the shiny. Time is not nature abhors a vacuum. Nature also abhors an empty brush pile. I meant to start our podcast with that yesterday. Our coffee time podcast with that yesterday, Nicholas, about how nature abhors. I literally there's 2 brush piles in my yard, Hal. A big one for like the real big stuff, and then the small one for like the little sticks where you pick up while you're mowing or working in the yard. And I kid you not, my grandparents burned down the big one a couple weeks before, and the very night that that afternoon, my grandparents came over. We had a little cookout with them over the smaller brush pile. That very night, one of my big maples that my great-grandmother planted in my yard split in half in a thunderstorm, and both brush piles are full again. So nature abhors a vacuum, and nature abhors an empty brush pile. But if you take people and you say, hey, no more blowing all your money on Disneyland, no more blowing all your money on a mountain of toys for your kids, no more blowing your money on fast food every night, okay, we're on board. But then the next question is, as everyone's looking around at each other, now what? And we're going to seek out something to do with our time, right? And it's, sure, some of it's going to go to reading more books and planting a garden and
that's
all those
the ideal.
All those wholesome things. But you're still going to need something for those people to do. And the public lands provide that free, the cost of gas and getting there, and maybe a few $100 on some hiking boots, and you got a place to go and find true enjoyment that anyone can have. And I think that's where the value of public lands and the value of a better life as Americans, something better to aspire to, go hand in hand.
Man. Well, Hal, before we go, if people are like, I got to read or listen to more of this guy, where can they find you?
Well, I have a website that hadn't been updated since I started this book, but I really asking people to come and check out the new podcast, which is called Carrying the Fire. Yep. I have 225 episodes of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers podcast behind me before I started this one. Mm-hmm. And I would love it if people were listening to some of that stuff. Doug Brinkley, the America's greatest historian, is on there. Yvonne Chenard from Patagonia. I have trappers. Some of the best elk hunters in the West are on there. Trey Curtis. If you're interested in elk hunting at all, the Trey Curtis podcast at Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is probably my high water mark for a person who knows more about elk hunting than anybody else. And it goes all the way back to like Lamar Marshall, who was a conservation fighter in Alabama, who was a trapper, and he was lived way out in the middle of nowhere off grid and ended up in this big battle over the national forest, and there's a long story to that. And these, I'm really, really hope people will still be listening to those. And then come to the new one. I've got Peter Stark on there on the Coronado expedition for my first one.
I'm listening to that one right now. It's very good.
Yeah, he's a very knowledgeable guy.
Yeah, and he laughs a lot. I like that about him.
Yeah. Well, he's really happy because he finished the book.
Yeah. He's still riding the high.
Yeah.
But you got a book coming out yourself here soon, right?
Yeah.
When's the release? When's the release date?
It's next year.
Okay.
And so we're working on the edits now, and I'm working on the last chapter now.
Well, I'm looking forward to an autographed copy here soon.
You'll get it. You'll get it. Nicholas, what were you? You had something there.
I really like the podcast you're starting, like the whole idea behind lost knowledge and keeping it going. Yeah. I think about that all the time. Like, man, how much lost knowledge do we have on how
on
to
our own
steward
farm?
the land, or even how to make soap. You know what I mean? It's like that was a household thing that everybody knew, and now nobody knows how to do it. Right. Just that kind of stuff. That really fascinates me, and I think it's important. It is very important. Progress is very important. And just as important is we need to collect the things we learned along the way. Otherwise, we'll end up having a king that bans people from hunting in his deer forest again here.
That's
and there.
right.
We got to collect stories, and I think you tell those stories really, really well. So Hal, thank you so much for joining. And everyone, I mean, this will not get solved purely by the government. It's not going to get solved just by people hooting and hollering. It starts with you. It starts with me, because conservation happens one mind at a time.